The elevator doors slid open with that familiar soft ding, but today the sound felt different. Final. I stepped into the marble lobby of TechFlow Solutions for what I knew would be the last time, clutching my laptop bag in the small cardboard box containing 8 years of my professional life. The security badge that had granted me access to every floor, every lab, every meeting room hung heavy around my neck like a weight I was about to shed forever. Richard Caldwell stood near the reception desk, his silver hair perfectly styled as always, wearing that same charcoal suit he favored for important meetings. He wasn't looking at me. He was studying his phone with the intense focus of a man desperate to avoid eye contact. 20 feet away, Patricia Mitchell sat in one of the leather chairs, her legs crossed elegantly, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She wore her victory like expensive perfume, something subtle but unmistakable to anyone close enough to notice. The receptionist, Maria, glanced up at me with eyes full of sympathy and confusion. She'd been here almost as long as I had watched me climb from junior developer to senior engineer, had seen me work weekends and holidays, had witnessed the birth of innovations that transformed this company from a struggling startup into a $12 million success story. Now she was watching me walk away in disgrace, branded as unreliable, unprofessional, and according to the official termination letter tucked in my box, fundamentally incompatible with the company culture. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Patricia's eyes met mine across the lobby, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. The polished veneer of concern she'd worn during the meeting upstairs vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. She'd orchestrated this moment with the precision of a conductor leading a symphony, every note played exactly as she'd written it. Her son's wife, the woman she'd never deemed worthy of the Mitchell name, was finally being put in her proper place. I walked past them both without a word. There was nothing left to say. Richard had made his decision based on poisoned whispers and manufactured concern. Patricia had planted seeds of doubt about my commitment, my attitude, my respect for authority. She'd painted me as a disruptive force, someone whose recent success had gone to her head, someone who no longer understood her place in the hierarchy. The irony was almost laughable. She had no idea that in trying to destroy me, she'd just handed me the key to everything I'd ever wanted. The automatic doors of TechFlow Solutions whooshed shut behind me for the final time, and I allowed myself one small smile. Patricia Mitchell had always underestimated me. Today, that would become the most expensive mistake of her life. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and until 3 hours ago I was the senior product developer at TechFlow Solutions in Austin, Texas. I'm 34 years old, and I've spent the last 8 years of my life building something extraordinary from nothing. When I walked through those doors as a fresh-faced MIT graduate in January 2017, I thought I was starting just another tech job. I had no idea I was about to create the algorithm that would revolutionize workflow automation, or that my mother-in-law would eventually use my own success as a weapon against me. Austin's tech scene is brutal and beautiful in equal measure. The city pulses with innovation, every coffee shop filled with entrepreneurs sketching business plans on napkins, every networking event crackling with the energy of people who believe they're about to change the world. I fell in love with it immediately. The warmth of Texas hospitality mixed with the cutting-edge ambition of Silicon Valley, all wrapped up in a city that still felt human-sized despite its explosive growth. TechFlow Solutions occupied 3 floors of a sleek glass building downtown, nestled between a trendy breakfast spot and a boutique law firm. When I started there, we had 47 employees and dreams bigger than our budget. The company specialized in workflow automation tools for small businesses, the kind of behind-the-scenes software that makes everything run smoother but never gets the glamorous headlines. It was exactly the kind of challenge I'd been craving since graduation. Richard Caldwell had founded the company 12 years earlier with the vision of democratizing efficiency. He believed that small businesses deserved the same sophisticated automation tools that Fortune 500 companies took for granted. It was a noble goal, and in those early days, his passion was infectious. He knew every employee by name, remembered details about our families, and had a way of making even the most mundane debugging session feel like we were participating in something historic. I started as a junior developer on the SmartSync team, working on their basic workflow coordination software. The product was solid but unremarkable, the kind of tool that worked well enough but didn't inspire anyone to write enthusiastic reviews. Small businesses bought it because they needed something, not because they loved it. That distinction bothered me more than it probably should have. During my first 6 months, I spent most of my time fixing bugs and implementing small feature requests. The work was competent but uninspiring, the technological equivalent of painting by numbers. I'd gone to MIT to push boundaries, to create something that had never existed before, not to spend my days troubleshooting email synchronization errors. But I was young and eager to prove myself, so I threw myself into every task with the enthusiasm of someone who still believed that hard work alone was enough to guarantee success. My breakthrough came during a particularly frustrating week in March 20. We'd received dozens of customer complaints about the time it took to set up automated workflow. Even the simplest automation required users to manually configure dozens of parameters, a process that often took hours and frequently resulted in errors that could cascade through entire business operations. The technical support team was overwhelmed with calls from confused customers, and our user retention rates were starting to slip. I spent that entire week studying the problem, not just from a coding perspective but from a user experience standpoint. I called customers directly, walked through their setup processes and listened to their frustrations. What I discovered was that most small business owners didn't want to become automation experts. They just wanted their systems to work intelligently without requiring them to understand the technical complexity underneath. That insight led me to start experimenting with adaptive algorithms during my personal time. Instead of forcing users to manually configure every aspect of their workflows, what if the software could learn from their existing patterns and suggest optimizations automatically? What if automation could be truly intelligent, reducing setup time from hours to minutes, while actually improving performance? I worked on the concept for months, staying late in the office, coming in on weekends, building prototypes during lunch break. The algorithm I was developing didn't just automate existing processes, it analyzed business patterns, identified inefficiencies and recommended improvements that users might never have considered. It was machine learning applied to small business optimization, a concept that seemed almost magical to the mom-and-pop shops that made up our customer base. Jessica Chen joined the team in September 2017, fresh out of UT Austin with a computer science degree and enough enthusiasm to power the entire building. She was assigned to my project team, and I immediately recognized a kindred spirit. Jessica had that same hunger for innovation that had driven me to spend countless hours refining my algorithm. More importantly, she had the technical skills to help me transform my prototype into production-ready code. We worked together seamlessly, Jessica handling the user interface design while I focused on the core algorithm. She had an intuitive understanding of how to make complex systems feel simple, a talent that proved invaluable as we refined the user experience. Our late-night debugging sessions became the foundation of both a revolutionary product and a friendship that would prove crucial in the months to come. The first version of what would eventually become the AutoFlow algorithm was ready for testing by January. The results exceeded even my most optimistic projections. Businesses that had previously struggled with workflow setup were creating sophisticated automations in under 30 minutes. More importantly, the algorithm's adaptive learning meant that these systems became more efficient over time, automatically adjusting to changing business patterns without requiring manual intervention. Richard was skeptical at first. Revolutionary claims were common in the tech industry, and he'd been burned before by developers who promised the moon and delivered incrementally improved mediocrity. But when I demonstrated the algorithm's capabilities during a company-wide presentation, the room fell silent in a way that had nothing to do with politeness and everything to do with genuine awe. The demonstration was simple but powerful. I connected the algorithm to a fictional bakery's operations, feeding it 6 months of historical data about orders, staffing, and supply deliveries. Within minutes, the system had identified 17 different inefficiencies and proposed specific solutions for each one. It predicted optimal staffing levels for different days of the week, suggested inventory adjustments that would reduce waste by 30%, and recommended timing modifications that would improve customer satisfaction scores. But the real magic happened when I introduced unexpected variables. I simulated a supply shortage, a last-minute large order, and a key employee calling in sick. Instead of breaking down or requiring manual reconfiguration, the algorithm adapted in real time, automatically adjusting workflows to maintain optimal efficiency despite the disruption. It was like watching a digital brain think through problems and solve them faster than any human could manage. The silence in the conference room stretched for nearly 30 seconds before Richard finally spoke. His voice was quieter than usual, tinged with the kind of wonder that experienced executives rarely allow themselves to display. "Sarah," he said, leaning forward in his chair, "this isn't just an improvement. This is a completely different category of product." Within 2 weeks, I was promoted to senior product developer and given a team of 6 engineers to help refine and implement the algorithm. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase, stock options, and most importantly, the resources to transform my innovation into TechFlow's flagship offering. It was everything I dreamed of when I first walked through those glass doors: validation that technical excellence and creative thinking were still valued in an industry increasingly dominated by marketing budgets and venture capital connection. The patent filing process began in March 2019, a complex legal undertaking that would prove to be one of the most important decisions of my career. Michael Torres, a senior patent attorney who specialized in software innovations, guided me through the intricacies of intellectual property law. He was a thoughtful man in his mid-40s, someone who understood both the technical aspects of what I'd created and the business implications of protecting it properly. Michael insisted on filing multiple patents to cover different aspects of the algorithm. The core autoflow patent protected the fundamental adaptive learning system, while 2 additional patents covered specific implementation methods and user interface innovation. Most importantly, he made sure that all 3 patents listed me as the primary inventor, with TechFlow Solutions named as the assignee. At the time, this seemed like a standard business arrangement. The company owned the rights to commercialize. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My invention, but my name remained permanently attached to the innovation itself. "Sarah," Michael told me during one of our filing meetings, "patents aren't just legal documents, they're historical records of innovation. 50 years from now, when someone studies the evolution of business automation, your name will be on the foundational technology. That matters more than most people realize." His words proved more prophetic than either of us could have imagined. The patents were approved in stages throughout 2019 and early 2020, each approval marking another milestone in what was becoming the most successful product in TechFlow's history. SmartSync Pro, the premium version of our software powered by my AutoFlow algorithm, launched in September 2020 to immediate acclaim. The timing couldn't have been better. The COVID-19 pandemic had forced millions of small businesses to rapidly digitize their operations, creating unprecedented demand for intelligent automation tools. SmartSync Pro offered exactly what these businesses needed: sophisticated workflow optimization that required minimal technical expertise to implement and maintain. Within 6 months of launch, the product was generating more revenue than the rest of TechFlow's offerings combined. By the end of 2020, SmartSync Pro accounted for 60% of the company's total revenue. The algorithm I'd developed during late nights and weekend sessions had transformed TechFlow from a modest regional player into a nationally recognized leader in business automation. Industry publications featured articles about our innovation, competitors scrambled to develop similar systems, and venture capital firms began circling with acquisition offers that Richard politely but firmly declined. The success was intoxicating, but it also attracted attention I hadn't anticipated. The tech industry loves a good origin story, and my journey from junior developer to patent-holding innovator fit perfectly into the narrative of American ingenuity and determination. Austin Business Journal featured me on their cover in March 2021, Forbes included me in their 30 Under 30 list for enterprise technology, and TechCrunch wrote a detailed analysis of how my algorithm was reshaping the automation landscape. The recognition was professionally validating but personally overwhelming. I'd always been more comfortable in the lab than in the spotlight, more excited about solving technical problems than discussing them with journalists, but the attention came with the territory, and I tried to handle it gracefully while staying focused on the work that mattered most to me. It was during this period of professional triumph that my personal life became complicated in ways I never could have predicted. David Mitchell and I had been dating since late 2018, having met at a tech industry mixer where his marketing expertise and my engineering background sparked immediate mutual interest. He was intelligent, charming, and refreshingly unpretentious for someone who worked in an industry often dominated by inflated egos and manufactured enthusiasm. David worked as a marketing manager at NextGen Corp, a competing tech company that specialized in enterprise software solutions. Our relationship required careful navigation of potential conflicts of interest, but we managed to keep our professional and personal lives appropriately separated. He understood the demands of my work without being threatened by my success, and I appreciated his ability to translate technical concepts into compelling marketing narratives. Our relationship progressed naturally and comfortably. David was supportive during the intense months of algorithm development, celebrating my victories and providing perspective during the inevitable setback. He understood the tech industry's peculiar rhythms, the way major breakthroughs often emerged from periods of apparent stagnation, the importance of persistence when facing seemingly insurmountable technical challenges. We got engaged in December 2018, married in June 2019, and for the first few years everything seemed perfect. David was proud of my achievements, supportive of my ambitions, and understanding about the long hours that came with developing revolutionary technology. He attended industry events as my partner, handled media attention with grace, and never made me feel like my success was somehow threatening to his masculinity or professional identity. But David came with Patricia, and Patricia had very different ideas about what my life should look like. Patricia Mitchell had been the vice president of business development at a Fortune 500 consulting firm before retiring in her late 50s. She was accomplished, intelligent, and accustomed to being the most powerful woman in any room she entered. Her career had been built during an era when female executives were rare enough to be remarkable, and she'd succeeded through a combination of exceptional competence and strategic relationship building that impressed even her harshest critic. The problem wasn't Patricia's professional accomplishments or her intelligence. The problem was her conviction that she understood exactly what kind of life would make her son happy, and her growing certainty that I wasn't part of that vision. From our first meeting, she'd evaluated me with the calculating precision of someone conducting a job interview for a position I hadn't applied for and didn't want. Patricia's concerns about me were never explicitly stated, but consistently implied through 1,000 small interactions. She questioned my long work hours, suggesting that truly successful people learned to delegate rather than doing everything themselves. She commented on my casual wardrobe, recommending boutiques where I could find clothes more appropriate for someone married to a Mitchell. She asked pointed questions about my family background, my educational credentials, and my long-term career plans, always with the tone of someone gathering evidence for a case she was building in private. Most troubling was her tendency to discuss my achievements in ways that diminished rather than celebrated them. When Austin Business Journal featured me on their cover, Patricia's response was to worry aloud about whether the attention might go to my head. When Forbes included me in their 30 under 30 list, she wondered if the recognition might make me less focused on family priorities. She had a gift for transforming every professional victory into a potential personal liability. David, caught between his wife and his mother, typically responded to these tensions by trying to minimize them. He'd explain Patricia's behavior as generational differences or professional instincts, anything that avoided acknowledging the fundamental disapproval underlying her constant subtle criticism. His approach was to smooth over conflicts rather than address them directly, a strategy that worked in the short term, but created mounting pressure that would eventually demand release. The situation became more complex as my professional profile continued to rise throughout 2020. Media attention increased, speaking requests multiplied, and industry recognition accumulated in ways that made it impossible to dismiss my success as temporary or accidental. I was becoming a public figure in Austin's tech community, someone whose opinions carried weight in boardrooms and whose innovations influenced product development across the industry. Patricia's response to my growing prominence was to become more creative in her criticism. She worried that I was becoming too focused on personal achievement at the expense of family relationships. She suggested that my success might be creating unrealistic expectations that would be difficult to maintain long-term. She questioned whether spending so much time in the public eye was compatible with the kind of stable family life that would be best for David's career and personal happiness. These concerns might have seemed reasonable if they were offered in a spirit of genuine care and support. But Patricia's tone and timing made it clear that she saw my success as a problem to be managed rather than an achievement to be celebrated. She was building a case that my professional trajectory was somehow incompatible with being a good wife, a narrative that became increasingly influential as David struggled to navigate the complex dynamics between the two most important women in his life. I earned my electrical engineering degree from MIT with a focus on artificial intelligence and machine learning, graduating summa cum laude. My thesis on predictive algorithms for resource optimization caught the attention of several major tech companies, but I chose TechFlow specifically because of their commitment to serving small businesses rather than just maximizing corporate profit. Richard Caldwell's vision of democratizing enterprise-level efficiency tools resonated with my own values about technology serving real people rather than just generating impressive quarterly reports. My parents, Robert and Helen Chen, had immigrated from Taiwan in the 1980s and built a successful small accounting firm in suburban Denver. Growing up, I watched them struggle with the inefficiencies that plague most small businesses: manual data entry, disconnected systems, time-consuming processes that ate into profits and family time. They worked 14-hour days not because they lacked business acumen, but because the tools available to them were designed for much larger organizations with dedicated IT departments and substantial technology budgets. That childhood experience shaped my entire approach to software development. Every algorithm I wrote, every user interface I designed, every optimization I implemented was filtered through the question of whether it would actually help someone like my parents run their business more effectively. Technical elegance meant nothing if it didn't translate into real-world improvements for people who had invested their entire lives in building something meaningful. This philosophy guided my work at TechFlow from day one. While my colleagues often focused on impressive technical specifications or features that would look good in marketing materials, I obsessed over practical usability. How long did it take a new user to achieve their first successful automation? How many support calls did each feature generate? How often did users abandon the setup process before completion? These metrics mattered more to me than any industry award or technical publication. My reputation for user-focused development made me popular with the customer support team, who appreciated working with an engineer who actually cared about reducing their call volume. Emma Rodriguez, our HR director, frequently mentioned during company meetings how unusual it was to have a developer who voluntarily attended customer feedback sessions and actively sought out complaints rather than avoiding them. This attention to real-world application proved crucial when I began developing the AutoFlow algorithm. Instead of starting with abstract mathematical models or theoretical frameworks, I began by studying actual small business workflows. I spent weeks observing operations at local restaurants, retail stores, service companies, and professional offices, documenting patterns and inefficiencies that owners had learned to accept as inevitable. What I discovered was that most small business automation failures weren't caused by technical limitations, but by fundamental misunderstandings about how these businesses actually operated. Enterprise software companies designed their products for organizations with predictable processes, dedicated training budgets, and full-time staff who could master complex systems. Small businesses needed tools that could adapt to chaotic schedules, untrained users, and constantly changing priorities. The AutoFlow algorithm addressed these challenges by learning from actual behavior rather than requiring predetermined configuration. Instead of forcing users to define every possible scenario in advance, the system observed their natural workflows and gradually optimized them through intelligent pattern recognition. It was like having a brilliant business consultant who worked silently in the background, constantly improving operations without requiring meetings, reports, or disruptive implementation processes. The development process consumed nearly 2 years of my life. I spent countless evenings and weekends refining the core algorithms, testing edge cases, and optimizing performance across different business types. Jessica Chen became my closest collaborator during this period, bringing fresh perspectives and catching problems that I'd become too close to notice. Our partnership was seamless, built on mutual respect and shared commitment to creating something genuinely revolutionary. Jessica had grown up in Austin, the daughter of a local restaurant owner who'd struggled with the same efficiency challenges that motivated my work. She understood small business realities from personal experience, having spent her childhood helping her father manage inventory, schedule staff, and coordinate suppliers using spreadsheets and handwritten notes. Her user interface designs reflected this practical knowledge, creating systems that felt intuitive even to people who'd never used automation software before. The first successful test of the complete AutoFlow system came in March 2019, using data from my parents' accounting firm in Denver. I'd convinced them to let me analyze 6 months of their operational data, promising that any insights generated would remain completely confidential. The results exceeded my wildest expectations. The algorithm identified 43 different optimization opportunities, from simple scheduling adjustments that would save 3 hours per week, to complex workflow reorganizations that could increase client capacity by 20% without adding staff. More importantly, the system's recommendations were practical and implementable. Instead of suggesting expensive technology upgrades or dramatic process overhauls, the AutoFlow algorithm focused on small incremental changes that could be tested and refined gradually. It understood that small business owners couldn't afford to disrupt their operations with experimental approaches, no matter how theoretically promising they might be. When I presented these results to Richard Caldwell, his reaction was immediate and decisive. He approved expanded development resources, fast-tracked the patent application process, and began planning a complete product redesign around the AutoFlow technology. For the first time in TechFlow's history, we had a genuinely proprietary advantage that couldn't be easily replicated by competitors with larger development budgets. The patent filing process proved more complex than I'd anticipated, requiring detailed documentation of every algorithmic innovation and clear differentiation from existing automation approaches. Michael Torres guided me through this process with patience and expertise, helping me understand how intellectual property law could protect creative work while still allowing for future innovation and improvement. Michael insisted on filing comprehensive patents that covered not just the core algorithm but also specific implementation methods and user interface innovation. He explained that software patents required particularly careful documentation because the line between abstract ideas and patentable inventions could be subtle and legally significant. We spent months creating detailed technical specifications that would establish clear ownership of the AutoFlow innovations, while providing sufficient detail for other engineers to understand and build upon the work. The most important decision Michael made was ensuring that my name appeared as the primary inventor on all 3 patents. While TechFlow Solutions was listed as the assignee, giving them commercial rights to the technology, the inventor credits belonged to me personally and couldn't be transferred or modified. This distinction seemed academic at the time, but Michael emphasized its importance for establishing professional credibility and protecting my interests in any future business negotiation. The patent approval process stretched across 2019 and into early 2020, with each approval marking another milestone in my professional development. The first patent, covering the core AutoFlow algorithm, was approved in August. The second, protecting specific implementation methods, followed in November. The third, covering user interface innovations, was approved in February 2020, just weeks before the COVID-19 pandemic began reshaping the entire business landscape. SmartSync Pro launched in September 2020, powered by the AutoFlow algorithm and positioned as TechFlow's premium automation solution. The timing proved fortuitous. as the pandemic had forced millions of small businesses to rapidly digitize their operations and seek efficiency improvements that could help them survive unprecedented economic challenges. SmartSync Pro offered exactly what these businesses needed: sophisticated automation that could be implemented quickly and adapted continuously as circumstances changed. The product's success exceeded every projection and transformed TechFlow's financial position almost immediately. Within 3 months of launch, SmartSync Pro was generating more monthly revenue than our entire existing product line. Customer satisfaction scores reached levels the company had never achieved. Support call volumes decreased dramatically and renewal rates approached 90%. Industry analysts began describing TechFlow as an overnight success, though those of us who'd lived through the development process knew how much work had preceded this apparent sudden breakthrough. Media attention followed commercial success, bringing recognition that was both professionally validating and personally overwhelming. I'd always been more comfortable solving technical problems than discussing them with journalists, but the interviews and speaking engagements became an unavoidable part of my new role as TechFlow's most visible innovator. Austin Business Journal, Forbes, TechCrunch, and dozens of other publications featured stories about the AutoFlow algorithm and its impact on small business automation. The recognition opened doors I'd never imagined walking through. Conference organizers invited me to deliver keynote speeches about innovation and entrepreneurship. Venture capital firms sought my opinions about emerging technologies and market opportunities. Other tech companies approached me about consulting arrangements and potential collaboration. For someone who'd started as a junior developer just 3 years earlier, the transformation was dizzying and sometimes surreal. David was incredibly supportive during this period of rapid professional growth. He understood the technology industry's dynamics well enough to appreciate what I'd accomplished, and he took genuine pride in my success without feeling threatened by the attention it brought. He attended industry events as my partner, handled media interactions with grace, and provided perspective when the pressure of sudden prominence became overwhelming. But David's mother had very different reactions to my rising profile, and her concerns became increasingly difficult to ignore or dismiss as harmless generational differences. Patricia Mitchell had built her own successful career in an era when female executives were rare enough to be remarkable, but her approach to professional achievement reflected the constraints and compromises that had been necessary during her generation. She seemed to view my more visible success with suspicion, as if rapid professional advancement inevitably came at the expense of personal relationships and family stability. Patricia's background as a corporate executive gave her opinions additional weight in David's mind. She'd navigated boardrooms and managed teams during decades when those environments were dominated by men who often resented female authority. Her success had required careful attention to perception management, strategic relationship building, and avoiding any behavior that might be interpreted as threatening or overly ambitious. She'd learned to achieve her goals through indirect influence rather than direct assertion, approach that had served her well but left her deeply skeptical of more visible leadership style. Our first serious conflict emerged in November 2020, just 2 months after SmartSync Pro's launch, when TechCrunch published a detailed profile of my work and its impact on the automation industry. The article was overwhelmingly positive, describing the AutoFlow algorithm as a breakthrough innovation that could reshape how small businesses approached efficiency optimization. The journalist had interviewed several customers who credited the technology with significant operational improvements and cost savings. Patricia's response to the article revealed the depth of her concerns about my growing prominence. During a family dinner at her house, she expressed worry that the media attention might be creating unrealistic expectations about my future achievements. She suggested that being featured so prominently in national publications could lead to pressure that might be difficult to sustain long-term. Most troubling, she wondered aloud whether spending so much time focused on public recognition was compatible with building the kind of stable family life that would support David's own career advancement. These concerns might have seemed reasonable if they'd been offered in a spirit of genuine care and support, but Patricia's tone and timing made it clear that she viewed my success as a problem to be managed rather than an achievement to be celebrated. She wasn't questioning whether the media attention might be overwhelming for me personally. She was questioning whether my approach to professional success was appropriate for someone married to her son. David's response to this tension was to minimize it rather than address it directly. He explained Patricia's concerns as generational differences, suggesting that her generation of female executives had faced different challenges that made them naturally cautious about high-profile success. He asked me to be patient with her adjustment period, promising that she'd become more comfortable with my achievements once she understood that professional recognition didn't threaten my commitment to our marriage. This pattern of minimization and deflection became increasingly frustrating as Patricia's concerns grew more frequent and specific. She began commenting on my work schedule, suggesting that truly successful people learn to delegate rather than doing everything themselves. She questioned my wardrobe choices, recommending boutiques where I could find clothes more appropriate for someone married into the Mitchell family. She asked pointed questions about my long-term career plans, always with the implication that my current trajectory might not be sustainable or desirable. Most concerning was Patricia's tendency to discuss my professional achievements in ways that diminished their significance or implied potential negative consequences. When Austin Business Journal featured me on their cover in March 2021, she worried that the recognition might make me less focused on family priorities. When I was invited to speak at the National Small Business Technology Conference, she questioned whether traveling for speaking engagements was compatible with maintaining strong local relationships. These conversations were particularly difficult because Patricia's concerns were always framed as caring advice rather than direct criticism. She never explicitly said that my success was inappropriate or threatening. She simply raised questions and expressed worries that had the cumulative effect of making me feel defensive about achievements that should have been sources of pride and satisfaction. The situation became more complex as my public profile continued growing throughout 2021. Industry publications regularly quoted my opinions about automation trends and small business technology needs. Conference organizers competed to secure me as a keynote speaker. University professors invited me to lecture about innovation and entrepreneurship. The White House Office of Science and Technology Policy asked me to participate in a roundtable discussion about supporting small business innovation. Each new recognition brought fresh expressions of concern from Patricia. She worried that I was becoming too focused on personal achievement at the expense of relationship building. She suggested that my success might be creating unrealistic expectations that would be difficult to maintain without sacrificing other important priorities. She questioned whether spending so much time in the public eye was wise for someone whose primary responsibility should be supporting her husband's career advancement. These concerns reached a crescendo in December 2021 when Fortune magazine named me to their 40 Under 40 list of rising business leaders. The recognition was incredibly meaningful to me, representing acknowledgement from the highest levels of the business community that my work was having genuine impact beyond just the technology industry. The accompanying article described the AutoFlow algorithm as a paradigm shift in small business automation and predicted that similar adaptive technologies would become standard across multiple industries. Patricia's reaction to the Fortune recognition was swift and revealing. During our next family dinner, she expressed concern that such high-level attention might attract unwanted scrutiny to my work and personal life. She wondered whether being included on prestigious lists might create pressure to maintain a public profile that could become exhausting and ultimately counterproductive. Most telling, she suggested that the recognition might make it difficult for me to step back from public roles if family priorities ever required more of my attention. The subtext was unmistakable. Patricia wasn't celebrating my achievement or expressing pride in my contribution to American innovation. She was laying groundwork for the argument that my success had become excessive and potentially problematic for family stability. She was building a case that my professional trajectory was incompatible with the kind of supportive wife role that she believed would best serve David's interests and the Mitchell family's long-term goals. David's continued reluctance to address these tensions directly became increasingly problematic as Patricia's concerns grew more frequent and pointed. He wanted to maintain harmony between the two most important women in his life, but his strategy of minimizing conflicts rather than resolving them was creating mounting pressure that would eventually demand release. He was asking me to accommodate concerns that felt increasingly unreasonable while refusing to acknowledge the toll that this accommodation was taking on my confidence and peace of mind. The professional recognition I was receiving validated years of hard work and innovative thinking, but Patricia's constant questioning made it impossible to enjoy these achievements without reservation. Every award, every speaking invitation, every media interview became a potential source of family tension rather than a milestone worth celebrating. I found myself downplaying accomplishments and declining opportunities that might generate additional attention, not because I didn't want them, but because I was exhausted by the predictable cycle of achievement followed by implied criticism. This pattern of diminishment was particularly painful because it came from someone whose own professional accomplishments I genuinely respected. Patricia had achieved remarkable success during an era when female executives faced far greater barriers than those I'd encountered. Her strategic thinking and business acumen were impressive by any standard, but instead of celebrating another woman's achievements or offering mentorship and support, she seemed threatened by success that followed a different model than her own carefully controlled approach. The tension reached a breaking point in early 2022 when Richard Caldwell announced that TechFlow was considering strategic partnerships with larger technology companies interested in licensing or acquiring the AutoFlow technology. The algorithm's success had attracted attention from major players in the enterprise software space, creating opportunities for expansion that could transform TechFlow from a regional company into a national leader in business automation. These discussions represented the culmination of everything I'd worked toward since joining TechFlow. The AutoFlow algorithm had proven its commercial value and technical superiority, creating opportunities that could benefit not just the company but also the thousands of small businesses that relied on our technology. The potential partnerships would provide resources for expanded research and development, allowing us to tackle even more complex automation challenges and serve broader markets. But Patricia viewed these developments through a very different lens. She saw them as evidence that my success had grown beyond reasonable bounds and was beginning to attract the kind of high-stakes attention that could disrupt family stability. She expressed concern that partnership negotiations might require even more travel and public appearances, further reducing my availability for family responsibility. She worried that the pressure of representing TechFlow in major business deals might create stress that could affect my personal relationships and overall well-being. Most revealing was her suggestion that I might want to consider stepping back from the most visible aspects of my role to allow other team members to handle partnership negotiations and public relations responsibility. She framed this as advice for protecting my long-term interests and maintaining work-life balance, but the implication was clear. My success had become inconvenient for family harmony, and it was my responsibility to scale it back to more manageable proportions. This conversation marked the moment when I began to understand that Patricia's concerns weren't really about my well-being or even about maintaining family relationships. They were about controlling the narrative of success within the Mitchell family and ensuring that my achievements didn't overshadow or complicate David's own professional advancement. She had a very specific vision of how our marriage should function, and my increasingly prominent career didn't fit that vision. The realization was both liberating and deeply troubling. Liberating because it allowed me to stop trying to address concerns that were fundamentally impossible to satisfy. Troubling because it revealed the extent to which Patricia was willing to undermine my confidence and career satisfaction to maintain her preferred family dynamic. She wasn't offering constructive advice or expressing genuine worry. She was systematically attempting to convince me that my success was problematic and should be voluntarily limited. This understanding changed how I approached family interactions and professional decisions. Instead of seeking Patricia's approval or trying to address her concerns, I focused on maintaining the boundaries necessary to protect my work and well-being. I stopped discussing major career developments during family gatherings, declined to engage with questions about my long-term plans, and made it clear that my professional choices were not subject to family committee review. The shift in dynamics was subtle but significant. Patricia could no longer rely on my eagerness to maintain harmony to give weight to her concerns and suggestions. David began to notice the increased tension, but continued to avoid addressing its root causes directly. Our family gatherings became more formal and less intimate, as genuine conversation became increasingly difficult when fundamental values and priorities remained unexamined and unresolved. Meanwhile, my work at TechFlow continued to flourish despite the growing personal complications. The AutoFlow algorithm's success had established me as a recognized expert in business automation, creating opportunities for consulting, speaking, and collaboration that extended far beyond my official company responsibility. I was invited to serve on advisory boards, participate in industry panels, and contribute to academic research about artificial intelligence applications in small business optimization. These external opportunities provided perspective that proved crucial as family tensions continued to escalate. Working with other successful women in technology reminded me that Patricia's concerns weren't universal truths about professional achievement, but reflected her own particular anxieties and assumptions. Other female executives celebrated visible success, embraced public recognition, and maintained strong personal relationships without viewing professional achievement as inherently threatening to family stability. This broader perspective helped me resist the gradual erosion of confidence that Patricia's constant questioning was designed to create. Instead of accepting her framing of my success as potentially problematic, I began to see her concerns as symptoms of deeper issues about gender roles, family power dynamics, and generational differences in approaching professional achievement. The contrast became even more apparent when I attended industry events and conferences where my work was celebrated without reservation or qualification. Conference organizers introduced me as a breakthrough innovator whose technology was transforming small business operations. Other entrepreneurs sought my advice about technical challenges and market opportunities. Venture capitalists discussed potential investment opportunities that could accelerate AutoFlow's development and deployment. These professional interactions reminded me that my achievements were genuinely significant and deserving of recognition, rather than constant justification. The AutoFlow algorithm represented a real breakthrough in business automation technology, and its success was creating tangible benefits for thousands of small business owners who could now access enterprise-level efficiency tools without requiring technical expertise or substantial capital investment. This recognition helped me maintain perspective as Patricia's campaign of diminishment intensified throughout 2022. Her concerns became more frequent and specific, focusing increasingly on the potential long-term consequences of maintaining such a visible professional profile. She suggested that my current trajectory might be unsustainable without sacrificing personal relationships or family planning priorities. She questioned whether the stress of representing TechFlow in high-stakes business negotiations was compatible with maintaining the kind of stable home environment that would support David's own career advancement. These conversations were exhausting because they required me to constantly defend choices and achievements that should have been sources of pride and satisfaction. Patricia had succeeded in making my professional success feel like a problem to be managed rather than an accomplishment to be celebrated, creating emotional dynamics that were difficult to navigate without either capitulating to her concerns or engaging in conflicts that would inevitably be portrayed as my refusal to prioritize family harmony. The situation was further complicated by David's continued reluctance to recognize or address the fundamental issues underlying these tensions. He genuinely loved both his wife and his mother, and he wanted desperately to find solutions that would satisfy everyone involved. But his approach of asking me to be patient with Patricia's concerns while asking her to be supportive of my achievements was fundamentally inadequate for addressing conflicts rooted in incompatible visions of appropriate gender roles and family dynamics. This pattern of avoidance and minimization would prove costly as Patricia's concerns evolved from private family discussions into more active efforts to influence external perceptions of my professional competence and personal character. She had concluded that subtle pressure and implied criticism weren't sufficient to achieve her goals of moderating my career ambitions and public profile. She was preparing to escalate her campaign in ways that would ultimately threaten not just my family relationships but also my professional reputation and financial security. The first major shift in our family dynamics occurred during Thanksgiving 2022, when Patricia decided to invite several of her longtime business associates to our traditional family dinner. She presented this as an opportunity for David and me to network with established Austin professionals. But her true intentions became clear when she spent the entire evening subtly redirecting conversations away from my recent achievements and toward topics that positioned David as the primary breadwinner and decision-maker in our household. When Gerald Hoffman, a retired banking executive, asked about my work at TechFlow, Patricia smoothly interjected with concerns about the demanding hours required in the technology industry and how challenging it must be for young couples to maintain work-life balance in such competitive fields. She expressed admiration for David's ability to support my career while maintaining his own professional advancement, framing my success as something that required his sacrifice, rather than recognizing it as an independent achievement. The conversation continued this pattern throughout the evening. Every mention of the AutoFlow algorithm or SmartSync Pro's success was quickly followed by Patricia's observations about the stress of rapid professional growth, or questions about whether such intense focus on career development left adequate time for other important life priorities. She never directly criticized my work, but she consistently framed it in ways that emphasized potential drawbacks rather than celebrating actual accomplishment. Most telling was her response when Margaret Chen, a successful real estate developer, asked specifically about the patent applications I'd filed for the AutoFlow technology. Patricia's face tightened almost imperceptibly before she smiled and said that while intellectual property was certainly important, she worried that young professionals sometimes became too attached to individual achievements, rather than focusing on collaborative team success. She suggested that the most sustainable career paths involved learning to share credit and build consensus rather than pursuing high-profile recognition. The subtext was unmistakable to anyone paying attention. Patricia was systematically undermining my credibility and professional standing in front of influential members of Austin's business community. She was planting seeds of doubt about my character, my priorities, and my approach to professional relationships. Most insidiously, she was doing this while maintaining plausible deniability, expressing what sounded like reasonable concerns about work-life balance and collaborative leadership. David either didn't notice these subtle dynamics, or chose to ignore them. When I tried to discuss the evening's conversations with him later, he dismissed my concerns as oversensitivity to his mother's well-intentioned advice. He suggested that Patricia was simply trying to help me navigate the challenges of rapid career advancement by sharing wisdom from her own experience in corporate environment. He reminded me that she'd achieved significant success during an era when female executives faced much greater barriers, making her insights particularly valuable. This pattern of gaslighting became increasingly frustrating as similar incidents occurred throughout late 20s. Patricia would create situations where my professional competence or personal character was subtly questioned. Then David would minimize my concerns and reframe her behavior as helpful mentorship. I found myself constantly defending my interpretation of events that should have been obviously problematic to anyone witnessing them objectively. The erosion of my confidence was gradual, but persistent. Patricia had identified my deep commitment to family harmony as a vulnerability that could be exploited to moderate my career ambitions. She understood that I valued my relationship with David too much to create ultimatums or demand that he choose between his wife and his mother. This knowledge allowed her to gradually escalate her undermining tactics, while knowing that I would be reluctant to force confrontations that might damage family relationships. My work performance began to suffer as these personal tensions consumed increasing amounts of emotional energy. I found myself second-guessing professional decisions that would have been automatic just months earlier. Speaking engagements that once felt energizing became sources of anxiety as I worried about potential family criticism of any additional visibility or recognition. I started declining opportunities that might generate media attention, not because I didn't want them but because I was exhausted by the predictable cycle of achievement, followed by implied disapproval. Jessica Chen was the first colleague to notice the changes in my behavior and demeanor. During a routine project review meeting in January 2023, she observed that I seemed unusually hesitant about proposing an ambitious timeline for AutoFlow's next major upgrade. The algorithm's success had created demand for enhanced features that could serve larger businesses and more complex operational challenges, but I was suggesting implementation schedules that seemed overly conservative, given our team's demonstrated capability. After the meeting, Jessica asked to speak privately about her observations. She'd known me for over 5 years and had never seen me approach technical challenges with anything less than complete confidence and enthusiasm. My sudden reluctance to pursue aggressive development goals seemed completely out of character, especially given the resources and support that TechFlow was providing for AutoFlow-related projects. When I tried to explain my hesitation as prudent project management, Jessica wasn't convinced. She pointed out that conservative timelines might actually hurt the AutoFlow algorithm's competitive position by allowing rival companies more time to develop similar technology. She reminded me that innovation required accepting calculated risks and that my previous willingness to push boundaries had been crucial to the algorithm's breakthrough success. Her perspective helped me recognize how significantly my confidence had been undermined by months of subtle criticism and implied concerns about my professional approach. I'd unconsciously internalized Patricia's suggestions that my ambitious career goals might be unsustainable or inappropriate, leading to more cautious decision-making that could actually threaten the continued success of my innovation. This realization prompted me to examine other areas where Patricia's influence had affected my professional behavior. I discovered that I'd been declining speaking engagements at a much higher rate than usual, often citing scheduling conflicts that were actually created by my reluctance to generate additional visibility. I'd stopped proposing new research directions that might lead to additional patents, telling myself that I wanted to focus on perfecting existing technologies rather than acknowledging my fear of family criticism about seeking too much recognition. Most concerning was my growing tendency to downplay my role in AutoFlow's development during interviews and public presentations. I'd begun emphasizing team collaboration and company support while minimizing my individual contributions to the algorithm's breakthrough innovation. This approach might have seemed appropriately modest, but it was actually undermining my professional reputation and reducing my influence in industry discussions about automation technology's future direction. The cumulative effect of these changes was to make me less effective in my role as TechFlow's leading innovation expert, while also reducing my market value as a potential consultant or collaborator with other companies. Patricia's campaign of subtle undermining was achieving her apparent goal of moderating my career trajectory, but at the cost of diminishing my professional impact and personal satisfaction. The situation reached a new level of intensity in March 2023, when Richard Caldwell announced that TechFlow had received a preliminary acquisition offer from Dataflow Industries, a major enterprise software company interested in licensing the AutoFlow technology for their own automation platform. The offer represented validation of my work's commercial value and could provide resources for expanding research into even more sophisticated business optimization tools. Richard scheduled a series of meetings to discuss the acquisition terms and explore whether a partnership arrangement might better serve TechFlow's long-term interests. These discussions would require detailed presentations about AutoFlow's technical capabilities, market potential, and intellectual property protections. As the algorithm's primary developer and patent holder, I would play a central role in any negotiations or due diligence process. Patricia's reaction to this development was swift and revealing. During our next family dinner, she expressed concern that acquisition discussions might create unrealistic expectations about my future career trajectory. She worried that being featured prominently in high-stakes business negotiations could lead to pressure that might be difficult to manage without affecting my personal relationships and overall well-being. More troubling was her suggestion that I might want to consider allowing other TechFlow executives to handle the most visible aspects of the acquisition discussions. She framed this as advice for protecting my long-term interests and avoiding the stress that often accompanied major business deals. She reminded me that successful negotiations required experienced dealmakers rather than technical experts, implying that my skills might not be well suited for high-level corporate discussions. The irony was profound. Patricia was suggesting that I should minimize my involvement in negotiations about technology that I'd invented and that generated millions of dollars in annual revenue for TechFlow. She was arguing that my own patents and innovations were too important to be represented by their actual creator, a position that revealed both her fundamental misunderstanding of intellectual property law and her willingness to undermine my professional interests to achieve her personal goals. David's response to these suggestions was characteristically passive. He acknowledged that acquisition negotiations could be stressful but suggested that Patricia's concerns were motivated by genuine care for my well-being, rather than any desire to limit my professional opportunity. He proposed that we wait to see how the initial discussions developed before making decisions about my level of involvement, effectively postponing any serious consideration of the underlying issue. This incident marked a turning point in my understanding of the family dynamics that had been developing over the previous year. Patricia wasn't simply expressing generational concerns about work-life balance or offering well-intentioned advice about managing career pressure. She was actively working to limit my professional influence and reduce my role in decisions that directly affected my own intellectual property and financial interests. The acquisition discussions proceeded through spring 2023, with TechFlow Industries expressing increasing interest in both licensing the AutoFlow technology and potentially acquiring TechFlow entirely. Their technical team conducted extensive due diligence reviews, examining the algorithm's capabilities, scalability, and competitive advantages. These sessions required detailed explanations of the mathematical models and implementation strategies that formed the core of my innovation. My performance during these technical presentations was exceptional, demonstrating both deep understanding of the underlying science and clear communication skills that impressed TechFlow executives. Their team leader, Dr. Amanda Walsh, specifically commented on the sophisticated engineering thinking that had produced such elegant solutions to complex automation challenges. She observed that the AutoFlow algorithm represented exactly the kind of breakthrough innovation that TechFlow was seeking to incorporate into their enterprise platform. These positive valuations from external experts provided important validation that contradicted Patricia's implied concerns about my professional competence and communication abilities. TechFlow's interest wasn't motivated by charity or misguided enthusiasm. It reflected hard-headed business analysis by experienced technology executives who understood the commercial value of genuine innovation. The acquisition discussions also clarified the central importance of my patents to any potential deal. TechFlow's attorneys spent considerable time reviewing the intellectual property protections that covered AutoFlow's core technologies, confirming that my name appeared as the primary inventor on all relevant filings. They made it clear that any licensing or acquisition agreement would need to include provisions that ensured continued access to my expertise and ongoing development efforts. This emphasis on my personal role in AutoFlow's continued development created obvious problems for Patricia's preferred narrative about team collaboration and shared credit. The legal and commercial realities of intellectual property law meant that my individual contributions couldn't be minimized or redistributed without undermining the entire value proposition that made TechFlow attractive to potential acquirers. The tension between these objective realities and Patricia's subjective concerns about my professional visibility came to a head during a family barbecue in May. Several of David's colleagues from NextGen Corp attended the gathering, creating another opportunity for Patricia to practice her subtle undermining techniques in front of influential members of Austin's technology community. When the conversation turned to recent developments in business automation, Patricia steered the discussion toward general industry trends rather than allowing focus on AutoFlow's specific innovation. She expressed concern about the rapid pace of change in technology markets and wondered whether companies that achieved sudden success might struggle to maintain their competitive advantages over time. She suggested that sustainable growth required careful attention to organizational culture and collaborative leadership rather than relying too heavily on individual achievements. The implications were clear to anyone familiar with TechFlow's recent history. Patricia was suggesting that AutoFlow's success might not be sustainable and that my individual role in its development might actually be a liability for the company's long-term prospect. She was undermining confidence in both my technical capabilities and my value as a team member, all while maintaining the appearance of offering thoughtful business analysis. This time, however, her tactics backfired. James Morrison, a senior software architect at NextGen, had been following AutoFlow's development through industry publications and recognized the sophisticated engineering thinking that had produced such breakthrough results. He asked specific technical questions about the algorithm's adaptive learning capabilities that could only be answered by someone with deep understanding of the underlying mathematical model. My responses demonstrated not only technical expertise but also clear vision for how automation technology could continue evolving to serve more complex business needs. James was visibly impressed by both the depth of my knowledge and the practical wisdom that guided my development priority. He commented that the autoflow algorithm represented exactly the kind of innovative thinking that would drive the next generation of business optimization tools. Patricia's expression during this conversation revealed her frustration with losing control of the narrative. She'd expected to redirect attention away from my individual contributions, but James's technical questions had made it impossible to discuss autoflow without acknowledging my central role in its creation and ongoing development. Her attempts to emphasize team collaboration sounded hollow when contrasted with obvious evidence of individual innovation and expertise. The evening marked a subtle shift in how David's colleagues perceived both my professional capabilities and Patricia's attempts to manage those perceptions. Several people approached me privately to express admiration for my work and to ask about potential collaboration opportunities. They recognized that Patricia's concerns didn't reflect objective assessment of my professional value, but seemed motivated by personal agendas that had little to do with technical merit or business wisdom. This external validation helped me resist the ongoing erosion of confidence that Patricia's campaign was designed to create. Instead of accepting her framing of my success as potentially problematic, I began to trust my own judgment about the value and significance of my professional achievement. The autoflow algorithm represented genuine innovation that was creating tangible benefits for thousands of small business owners, and its commercial success reflected market recognition of that value rather than temporary good fortune or misguided enthusiasm. The contrast between external recognition and family criticism became even more pronounced as Dataflow's acquisition discussions intensified through. Their executives expressed increasing confidence that Autoflow's technology could transform their enterprise automation offerings, potentially creating new market opportunities worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They were prepared to offer terms that would make TechFlow's shareholders, including me through my stock options, financially independent. Patricia's response to these developments was to escalate her concerns about the potential personal costs of high-stakes business negotiations. She worried that acquisition discussions might require extensive travel and media attention that could disrupt family stability and work-life balance. She suggested that the pressure of representing TechFlow in major corporate deals might create stress that could affect my health and personal relationships. Most revealing was her proposal that I might want to consider transitioning to a more behind-the-scenes role that would allow me to continue developing innovative technologies without the burden of public visibility and external pressure. She framed this as protecting my long-term interests and ensuring that my technical skills could be applied without the distractions that came with high-profile business responsibilities. The suggestion was both insulting and strategically misguided. Patricia was proposing that I voluntarily marginalize myself during the most important business negotiations in TechFlow's history, essentially removing myself from decisions that would directly affect my financial future and professional legacy. She was asking me to sacrifice potential life-changing opportunities to accommodate her discomfort with my professional success and public recognition. David's continued reluctance to recognize the fundamental problems with his mother's suggestions became increasingly difficult to tolerate. He was asking me to be patient with concerns that were becoming more unreasonable and personally damaging while refusing to acknowledge the toll that this patience was taking on my confidence and career satisfaction. His strategy of minimizing conflicts rather than addressing them was enabling Patricia's escalating campaign of undermining while placing the entire burden of accommodation on me. The situation was further complicated by subtle changes in how Patricia discussed my work with other family members and social contacts. She'd begun expressing concerns about whether my recent success might be affecting my judgment and priorities, suggesting that rapid professional advancement sometimes led to unrealistic expectations and poor decision-making. She worried that I might be becoming too focused on individual recognition rather than collaborative team building. These concerns were particularly insidious because they contained just enough plausible truth to seem reasonable to people who didn't understand the specific circumstances. Professional success can sometimes lead to ego problems and poor judgment, and maintaining work-life balance is genuinely challenging in competitive industry. But Patricia was using these general truths to create specific doubts about my character and competence that weren't supported by actual evidence. The campaign reached its most sophisticated level when Patricia began leveraging her own professional network to gather information about acquisition negotiations and industry developments that she could use to demonstrate superior business knowledge and strategic thinking. She'd cultivated relationships with several technology executives over her career, and she used these connections to stay informed about TechFlow's activities and TechFlow's competitive position. This information allowed her to raise seemingly informed questions about acquisition timing, valuation methods, and integration challenges that could influence family discussions about my role in ongoing negotiations. She could express concern about specific deal terms or market conditions in ways that seemed to reflect deep business expertise, rather than personal animosity toward my professional success. The effect was to position herself as a more reliable source of business wisdom than me, despite my direct involvement in the technical development and commercial application that made TechFlow attractive to potential acquirers. She was systematically undermining my credibility as a business decision-maker while simultaneously demonstrating her own strategic thinking and industry knowledge. This pattern culminated in August 2023, when Patricia arranged a dinner with Richard Caldwell and his wife Elena, ostensibly to celebrate TechFlow's recent success and express family support for the ongoing acquisition discussion. The evening was carefully orchestrated to allow Patricia to demonstrate her business acumen, while subtly raising concerns about my role in representing the company during high-stakes negotiations. Patricia's approach during this dinner was masterful in its subtlety and strategic planning. She expressed genuine admiration for TechFlow's achievements, while questioning whether the company's rapid growth might be creating internal pressures that could affect decision-making quality. She wondered whether young professionals who achieved sudden success might sometimes struggle with the transition to more complex business responsibilities. She never mentioned me by name or directly criticized my performance, but the implications were unmistakable to anyone following the conversation carefully. She was suggesting that I might not be ready for the sophisticated business negotiations required to maximize TechFlow's acquisition value, and that more experienced executives might be better positioned to protect the company's interest during complex deal-making process. Richard's response was polite but non-committal, suggesting that he valued diverse perspectives and believed that technical expertise was crucial for any successful acquisition negotiation. He observed that TechFlow's interest was primarily motivated by AutoFlow's innovative capabilities, rather than TechFlow's general business operations, making my involvement essential for accurate representation of the technology's potential applications and development possibility. But Patricia had succeeded in planting seeds of doubt about my readiness for high-level business responsibilities, concerns that could influence Richard's thinking about role assignments and negotiation strategies even if he didn't accept her suggestions immediately. She demonstrated her own business sophistication while creating subtle pressure for Richard to reconsider whether my technical expertise was sufficient for the complex commercial discussions that lay ahead. The dinner marked the beginning of what would become Patricia's most dangerous phase of undermining. She'd moved beyond subtle family criticism and social network management to direct attempts to influence my professional relationships and business opportunities. She was no longer content to moderate my career ambitions through emotional manipulation. She was actively working to limit my access to decision-making processes that affected my own financial interests and professional future. This escalation would prove to be a critical strategic error. Until this point, Patricia's campaign had been difficult to document or prove, because it relied on subtle implications and plausible deniability. But her attempts to directly influence business relationships would create evidence of her intentions and methods that could be used to expose her manipulation and protect my interests. The stage was set for the final phase of our conflict, where Patricia's growing desperation to control my career trajectory would lead her to take risks that would ultimately expose her true intentions and provide me with the proof I needed to defend myself against her increasingly sophisticated campaign of professional sabotage. September 2023 brought the confrontation I'd been dreading, but now realized was inevitable. Patricia had grown increasingly bold in her attempts to influence my professional relationships, and her latest move crossed every line of appropriate family behavior. She'd arranged a private lunch with Richard Caldwell under the pretense of discussing community charity work, but used the opportunity to express serious concerns about my emotional stability and decision-making capabilities during the crucial data flow acquisition negotiation. I discovered this betrayal through Jessica Chen, who'd overheard Emma Rodriguez discussing the situation with another HR colleague. According to Emma's account, Patricia had suggested that my recent behavior showed signs of stress-related judgment problems that could jeopardize TechFlow's most important business opportunity. She'd painted a picture of someone struggling with the pressure of sudden success, becoming increasingly isolated from team members and resistant to collaborative input on critical decisions. The accusations were sophisticated lies that contained just enough twisted truth to seem plausible to someone who hadn't witnessed my actual work performance. Patricia had taken my appropriate confidence in technical discussions and reframed it as arrogant. She'd interpreted my declining of some social invitations as evidence of antisocial behavior rather than understanding that I was protecting myself from her constant criticism. Most damaging, she'd suggested that my passion for the autoflow algorithm indicated unhealthy obsession with personal recognition rather than celebrating innovative thinking. When Jessica relayed this information, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The patient accommodation I'd practiced for months suddenly seemed not just ineffective, but actively self-destructive. Patricia wasn't going to be satisfied with subtle influence or behind-the-scenes manipulation. She was prepared to destroy my professional reputation to achieve her goal of controlling my career trajectory and limiting my influence within our family. That evening, I confronted David about his mother's lunch with Richard. His initial response was to deny that anything inappropriate had occurred, suggesting that Patricia was simply expressing natural concern about the stress that acquisition negotiations placed on everyone involved. When I pressed for specifics about what concerns she'd raised, he became defensive and accused me of being paranoid about his mother's motivations. The conversation escalated quickly into our first serious argument about Patricia's behavior. David accused me of allowing career success to make me suspicious and self-centered, unable to accept well-intentioned advice from someone with decades of business experience. He suggested that my reaction to his mother's concerns proved that she might be right about stress affecting my judgment and perspective. I realized in that moment that David had been completely captured by his mother's narrative about my character and professional competence. He genuinely believed that Patricia's undermining campaign was motivated by love and concern rather than recognizing it as systematic manipulation designed to limit my independence and success. His inability to see the obvious pattern of emotional abuse made it clear that he couldn't be relied upon to protect our marriage from his mother's interference. The next morning, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. I started documenting every interaction with Patricia, every conversation with David about family dynamics, and every instance where her influence had affected my professional relationships or personal confidence. If she was determined to escalate this conflict into a direct attack on my career, I needed evidence that could expose her tactics and protect my interests. Jessica became my closest ally during this period, helping me understand the full scope of Patricia's networking campaign and its potential impact on my professional reputation. She'd noticed that several TechFlow colleagues had begun asking subtle questions about my stress levels and work-life balance, suggesting that Patricia's concerns were spreading through informal channels that would be difficult to trace or refute directly. More troubling was Jessica's discovery that Patricia had been cultivating relationships with several Dataflow executives' wives through Austin's charity circuit. These social connections provided her with access to information about acquisition negotiations and opportunities to share her concerns about my emotional stability with people who could influence their husbands' professional decisions. The sophistication of Patricia's campaign was both impressive and terrifying. She'd identified every leverage point that could affect my career prospects and systematically worked to undermine my credibility through channels that seemed completely unrelated to business or professional competition. She was using her social position and networking skills to wage a war against my success that was almost impossible to defend against using conventional approaches. But Patricia had made one critical error in her strategic plan. She'd assumed that I would continue to prioritize family harmony over professional self-protection, allowing her to escalate her attacks without facing serious consequence. She hadn't anticipated that her direct attempt to influence Richard Caldwell would finally force me to recognize the true nature of our conflict and respond accordingly. October 2023 marked the beginning of my counteroffensive. Instead of continuing to accommodate Patricia's concerns or trying to address them through family discussions, I began systematically documenting her pattern of manipulation and gathering evidence that could be used to expose her true motivations if necessary. The first breakthrough came when I discovered that Patricia had been recording our family conversations using a smartphone app, apparently gathering material that could be edited to support her narrative about my emotional instability and poor judgment. I found evidence of this surveillance when David left his phone unlocked after a family dinner, revealing text messages between him and his mother discussing specific quotes from our private conversations. This discovery was both shocking and legally significant. Patricia's secret recording of family conversations without consent violated Texas privacy laws and provided clear evidence of her manipulative intention. More importantly, it demonstrated that her concerns about my behavior weren't spontaneous reactions, but part of a calculated campaign that required detailed planning and documentation. I immediately consulted with Michael Torres about the legal implications of Patricia's surveillance activities and the intellectual property issues surrounding any potential acquisition negotiation. Michael was appalled by the evidence I'd gathered and strongly recommended that I take immediate steps to protect both my patents and my professional reputation from further attack. His analysis of the situation was sobering but clear. Patricia's attempts to influence business negotiations about technology that I'd invented could potentially constitute tortious interference with business relationships, a serious legal violation that could result in significant financial liability. Her recording of private conversations without consent added criminal law violations to the civil claims that could be pursued if her behavior continued to escalate. More immediately relevant was Michael's assessment of how Patricia's campaign could affect the dataflow acquisition negotiation. If her concerns about my emotional stability gained credibility with key decision-makers, it could reduce the valuation of my patents and limit my role in ongoing development projects. This potential financial damage provided legal grounds for seeking protective orders and pursuing damage claims that could deter further interference. Armed with this legal framework, I began gathering additional evidence of Patricia's manipulation tactics and their impact on my professional relationship. I discovered that she'd contacted 3 other technology executives in Austin, expressing concerns about my reliability and suggesting that my recent success might be creating unrealistic expectations about my future capability. These conversations were particularly damaging because they occurred within Austin's tight-knit technology community, where reputation and personal relationships often determined business opportunity. Patricia's systematic campaign to undermine my credibility could have long-term consequences that extended far beyond the immediate dataflow negotiations. The evidence I gathered also revealed the sophisticated nature of Patricia's psychological manipulation technique. She'd been using classic gaslighting strategies to make me question my own perceptions and judgment, while simultaneously building external narratives that supported her version of events. Her approach was systematic enough to suggest either extensive research into emotional abuse tactics or natural talent for manipulation that was truly frightening. November 2023 brought the crisis I'd been anticipating since discovering the full scope of Patricia's campaign. Richard Caldwell called a meeting to discuss concerns that had been raised about my ability to handle the stress of acquisition negotiations and represent TechFlow effectively during high-stakes business discussions. The meeting was carefully structured to seem like a supportive intervention rather than a disciplinary action. Richard expressed appreciation for my technical contributions, while suggesting that the pressure of recent success might be affecting my judgment and collaborative ability. He proposed that I might benefit from stepping back from the most visible aspects of acquisition negotiations, while continuing to provide technical expertise in a more limited role. Emma Rodriguez was present to provide HR perspective, and her discomfort with the situation was obvious to anyone paying attention. She clearly understood that the concerns being raised weren't supported by my actual work performance or colleague feedback, but she was being pressured to participate in a process that had been initiated by external influences, rather than legitimate workplace issues. I realized that this meeting represented Patricia's endgame. She'd successfully convinced Richard that my professional competence was questionable, creating conditions where I could be marginalized from decisions about my own intellectual property without obvious legal violations. The acquisition negotiations would proceed without my meaningful involvement, reducing my influence and potential financial benefits while validating her narrative about my limitations. But I was no longer the accommodating person who would accept unfair treatment to preserve family harmony. I'd spent weeks preparing for this confrontation, gathering evidence and developing strategies that could expose Patricia's manipulation while protecting my professional interests. The time had come to defend myself using every resource at my disposal. I responded to Richard's concerns by requesting a formal performance review that would document my actual contributions to TechFlow's success and provide objective assessment of my professional capabilities. I also requested that any decisions about my role in acquisition negotiations be based on measurable criteria rather than subjective concerns about stress management or collaborative abilities. More importantly, I informed Richard that I'd discovered evidence of external interference in TechFlow's business relationships that could constitute illegal attempts to manipulate acquisition negotiation. I explained that my mother-in-law had been conducting a systematic campaign to undermine my professional reputation, including unauthorized recording of private conversations and direct attempts to influence executive decision-making. Richard's expression during this revelation was a mixture of shock, confusion, and growing anger as he realized that he'd been manipulated into participating in what amounted to a personal vendetta against one of his most valuable employees. The implications for TechFlow's business relationships and legal liability were obviously significant, creating potential complications that could affect the entire acquisition process. Emma Rodriguez immediately recognized the serious HR and legal issues raised by my allegation. Unauthorized surveillance of employees, even by family members, created significant liability for the company if they acted on information obtained through illegal means. External attempts to influence personnel decisions through false information could constitute multiple violations of employment law and business ethics standards. The meeting was suspended while Richard and Emma consulted with TechFlow's legal counsel about the appropriate response to my allegations. Within hours, the company had initiated a formal investigation into Patricia's activities and their impact on business operations. They also implemented temporary protective measures that limited external access to information about acquisition negotiations and personnel decisions. December 2023 brought swift and decisive resolution to the immediate crisis. TechFlow's investigation confirmed the accuracy of my allegations, but Patricia's manipulation campaign, including verification of the unauthorized recordings and documentation of her attempts to influence executive decision-making through false information about my professional competence. The legal implications were severe enough that TechFlow's attorneys recommended immediate action to prevent further interference and protect the company from potential liability. They sent Patricia a formal cease and desist letter demanding that she end all contact with TechFlow employees and business associates regarding company operations or personnel matters. More significantly, they required her to provide written confirmation that she would not attempt to influence the Dataflow acquisition negotiations through any direct or indirect means. The letter made clear that further interference could result in criminal charges for harassment and civil liability for tortious interference with business relationships. Richard Caldwell's apology for allowing external manipulation to affect internal personnel decisions was sincere and comprehensive. He acknowledged that the concerns raised about my professional competence weren't supported by evidence and had been inappropriately influenced by sources with personal rather than business motivation. He committed to ensuring that future decisions would be based solely on objective performance criteria and legitimate business consideration. The investigation's findings also triggered a broader review of TechFlow's policies regarding external influence on business operations and employee relations. The company implemented new protocols for handling concerns about employee performance that required documented evidence and multiple verification sources before any action could be taken. David's reaction to the exposure of his mother's manipulation campaign was devastating to witness. The evidence of her systematic deception and illegal surveillance activities shattered his trust in someone he'd defended and supported throughout our entire marriage. He was forced to confront the reality that his mother had been willing to destroy his wife's career to achieve her personal goals, using his love and loyalty as weapons against his own family's interest. The revelation created an immediate crisis in David's relationship with both his mother and me. He couldn't deny the evidence of Patricia's manipulation, but he also struggled to accept that someone he'd trusted implicitly had been systematically deceiving him for months. His initial response was to withdraw from both relationships while trying to process the implications of what he'd learned. I felt profound sadness watching David grapple with his mother's betrayal, but I also felt relief that the truth had finally been exposed and documented. The gaslighting and constant criticism that had been undermining my confidence for months was revealed as calculated manipulation rather than legitimate concern, allowing me to trust my own judgment and perceptions again. The data flow acquisition negotiations resumed in January 2024 with my full participation and without any external interference. The delay caused by Patricia's manipulation campaign had actually worked in TechFlow's favor, as Dataflow's continued interest demonstrated genuine commitment to the autoflow technology rather than temporary enthusiasm that might have faded during extended discussion. My performance during the resumed negotiations was exceptional, demonstrating both technical expertise and business acumen that impressed Dataflow's executive team. The months of documented attacks on my competence had actually strengthened my resolve to prove my capabilities and protect the intellectual property that represented years of innovative work. The final acquisition terms exceeded everyone's expectations, providing TechFlow shareholders with financial returns that validated the commercial value of breakthrough innovation. My role as the autoflow algorithms inventor was prominently featured in all acquisition documentation, ensuring that my professional reputation and future opportunities were enhanced rather than diminished by the experience. February 2024 marked a new beginning in multiple aspects of my life. The acquisition provided financial independence that allowed me to make personal and professional decisions based on my values and interest, rather than external pressure or family expectation. More importantly, the successful resolution of Patricia's manipulation campaign had given me confidence to trust my own judgment and pursue opportunities without constant second-guessing. David and I entered couples counseling to address the damage that his mother's manipulation had caused to our relationship and communication pattern. The process was difficult but ultimately healing, helping us understand how external manipulation had affected our ability to support each other during professional and personal challenges. The therapy revealed that David's conflict avoidance strategies, while well-intentioned, had enabled his mother's escalating manipulation by refusing to acknowledge clear patterns of inappropriate behavior. He learned to recognize emotional manipulation tactics and developed skills for setting appropriate boundaries with family members who attempted to interfere in our relationship. I learned to identify early warning signs of gaslighting and other psychological manipulation techniques, knowledge that proved valuable for maintaining confidence in my professional judgment and personal perception. The experience had taught me that accommodating unreasonable behavior often encourages escalation rather than resolution. March 2024 brought an unexpected opportunity that demonstrated how protecting my professional reputation had created new possibilities for innovation and leadership. Stanford University's Graduate School of Business invited me to serve as a visiting lecturer on technology, entrepreneurship, and intellectual property strategy, recognizing my experience navigating complex business negotiations while maintaining technical innovation focus. The position provided a platform for sharing insights about breakthrough innovation, business ethics, and the importance of protecting individual contributors' rights within corporate environment. My story had become a case study in how external manipulation could threaten both personal relationships and business operations, offering valuable lessons for other technology professionals facing similar challenges. Jessica Chen joined me at Stanford as a research associate, continuing our collaboration on advanced automation technologies while exploring academic approaches to business optimization research. Our partnership had survived the crisis and emerged stronger, based on mutual respect and shared commitment to ethical innovation practice. The academic environment provided perspective on how my experience with Patricia's manipulation campaign reflected broader patterns of gender-based professional undermining that many successful women encounter. My story wasn't unique, but the documentation and legal response had created precedents that could help other professionals defend themselves against similar attacks. April 2024 marked the launch of my consulting practice, focused on helping small businesses implement sophisticated automation technologies while maintaining human-centered approaches to efficiency optimization. The AutoFlow algorithm's success had created demand for customized solutions that required deep understanding of both technical capabilities and practical business operation. The consulting work was deeply satisfying because it returned to my original motivation for developing automation technologies, helping hardworking business owners achieve their goals without sacrificing family time or personal well-being. Every successful implementation validated the years of development work and reminded me why innovation matters more than recognition or financial reward. My client base included many businesses similar to my parents' accounting firm, organizations that needed enterprise-level efficiency tools but couldn't afford traditional enterprise-level complexity or cost. The AutoFlow algorithm's adaptive learning capabilities made sophisticated optimization accessible to companies that had previously been excluded from automation technologies' benefits. The success of my independent practice also demonstrated that Patricia's concerns about my professional sustainability had been completely unfounded. Rather than struggling with the pressure of individual recognition, I was thriving in an environment where my technical expertise and business judgment were valued without reservation or qualification. David's relationship with his mother remained strained, but gradually improved as Patricia accepted responsibility for her manipulation campaign and sought therapy to address the controlling behaviors that had motivated her interference. The process was slow and sometimes difficult, but it provided hope for eventual family healing based on honest acknowledgement of past mistakes. Patricia's apology to me was comprehensive and seemingly sincere, acknowledging that her concerns about my career had been motivated by personal insecurity rather than legitimate worry about family stability. She recognized that her manipulation tactics had been wrong and potentially criminal, accepting full responsibility for the damage they had caused to both my professional reputation and our family relation. The apology was meaningful, but it didn't erase the months of psychological manipulation or the professional damage that had required extensive effort to repair. Trust would need to be rebuilt gradually through consistent behavior, rather than restored immediately through words, no matter how carefully chosen or apparently heartfelt. May 2024 brought recognition that validated everything I'd endured during the previous year's crisis. The National Academy of Engineering elected me to fellowship status, acknowledging the AutoFlow algorithm's contribution to advancing automation technology and its practical applications for small business optimization. The honor was particularly meaningful because it represented peer recognition from other engineers and researchers who understood the technical challenges involved in creating truly adaptive automation systems. Their evaluation was based solely on scientific merit and practical impact, free from the personal agendas and family politics that had complicated other forms of recognition. The fellowship ceremony provided an opportunity to reflect on the journey from junior developer to recognized innovator, including the obstacles that had threatened to derail my career and the support systems that had made success possible. Jessica Chen, Michael Torres, Emma Rodriguez, and even Richard Caldwell attended the ceremony, representing the professional relationships that had sustained me through the most difficult period of my career. David's presence at the ceremony was especially meaningful because it demonstrated his commitment to supporting my professional achievements without reservation or qualification. He'd learned to celebrate my success without feeling threatened or concerned about family reactions, a transformation that had required significant personal growth and courage. June 2024 marked the first anniversary of Patricia's manipulation campaign reaching its peak intensity. The date prompted reflection on how much had changed in my understanding of family dynamics, professional relationships, and personal boundaries since discovering the full scope of her interference. The experience had taught me that accommodating unreasonable behavior rarely leads to improved relationships or reduced conflict. Instead, clear boundaries and firm consequences for manipulation attempts create conditions where genuine respect and healthy communication become possible. I'd also learned that professional success requires protecting both technical innovations and personal reputation from those who would undermine them for their own purpose. Intellectual property rights and legal protections exist precisely because individual contributors need defenses against manipulation and interference by those with different priorities or motivation. July 2024 brought the announcement that the AutoFlow algorithm had been licensed by 3 additional major technology companies, creating a royalty stream that would provide long-term financial security while spreading the technology's benefits to millions of additional small businesses worldwide. The licensing agreements included provisions that ensured my continued involvement in algorithm development and improvement, protecting both my financial interests and my professional expertise from any future attempts at marginalization or replacement. The contracts were structured to recognize individual innovation while providing resources for continued research and development. These licensing deals also created opportunities for collaboration with other technology innovators and researchers, expanding my professional network beyond the relatively small Austin technology community, where Patricia's manipulation campaign had once threatened my reputation and relationship. August 2024 marked the launch of the Sarah Mitchell Foundation for Technology Innovation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting breakthrough research in business automation and helping underrepresented innovators protect their intellectual property rights. The foundation's mission reflected lessons learned from my own experience with external interference and manipulation. Too many brilliant innovations fail to reach their potential because individual contributors lack resources to defend their rights or navigate complex business negotiations that determine how their work is commercialized and recognized. Jessica Chen joined the foundation as its first research director, continuing our collaboration while creating opportunities for other young engineers and computer scientists to develop breakthrough technologies without sacrificing personal well-being or family relations. September 2024 brought a full-circle moment when I was invited to speak at TechFlow's annual company meeting, sharing insights about innovation, professional resilience, and the importance of protecting individual contributors' rights within collaborative business environments. Richard Caldwell's introduction acknowledged both my technical contributions to TechFlow's success and my courage in exposing manipulation tactics that could have damaged the company's business relationships and legal standing. He emphasized that protecting individual innovators from external interference was essential for maintaining the trust and creative freedom that drive breakthrough development. The presentation provided an opportunity to share lessons learned about recognizing and responding to professional manipulation, offering practical advice for other technology professionals who might face similar challenges. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with numerous colleagues expressing appreciation for my willingness to discuss difficult topics that are often ignored or minimized. My story had become a case study in how systematic manipulation campaigns can threaten both individual careers and business operations, but also in how proper documentation and legal response can expose such tactics and protect intended victims. The experience had transformed from personal trauma into professional expertise that could benefit others facing similar challenges. October 2024 marked 2 years since Patricia had first begun her systematic campaign to undermine my professional reputation and limit my career opportunity. The anniversary prompted reflection on how completely the situation had been reversed through courage, documentation, and professional support. Rather than being marginalized from my own intellectual property and business opportunities, I was now recognized as a leading expert in automation technology with expanding influence and financial independence. The manipulation campaign that was intended to limit my success had ultimately strengthened my resolve and expanded my impact beyond anything I could have achieved without facing those challenges. Patricia's relationship with our family had stabilized based on clear boundaries and honest acknowledgement of past mistakes. She'd learned to express concerns constructively rather than through manipulation, and she'd developed respect for my professional judgment and business capabilities that had been absent during our earlier interaction. David had become a stronger partner and husband through learning to recognize manipulation tactics and set appropriate boundaries with family members who attempted to interfere in our relationship. Our marriage had survived a crisis that could have destroyed it, emerging healthier and more resilient than it had been before the challenges began. November 2024 brought the publication of my book Innovation Under Fire, Protecting Breakthrough Technologies from Professional Sabotage, which became a bestseller among technology professionals and business leaders interested in intellectual property strategy and workplace ethics. The book detailed my experience with Patricia's manipulation campaign, while providing practical guidance for other innovators facing external interference or systematic undermining. It emphasized the importance of documentation, legal protection, and professional support networks for maintaining creative freedom and business success. The positive reception demonstrated widespread recognition that professional manipulation and interference are serious problems that require systematic responses rather than individual accommodation or family diplomacy. My story had become part of a larger conversation about protecting individual contributors' rights within complex business and family environments. December 2024 marked the culmination of a transformative year, with the announcement that the AutoFlow algorithm had been selected as one of the decade's most influential innovations by the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineering, the world's largest professional organization for technology advancement. The recognition validated not only the technical merit of my work, but also the importance of protecting individual innovators from external manipulation and interference. The algorithm's continued success demonstrated that breakthrough innovation requires both technical excellence and personal resilience to overcome obstacles that have nothing to do with scientific merit or commercial value. As I stood on stage accepting the award, I reflected on the journey from junior developer to recognized innovator, including the manipulation campaign that could have destroyed my career and the support systems that made recovery and continued success possible. The experience had taught me that professional achievement requires protecting both technical innovations and personal integrity from those who would undermine them for their own purposes. The woman who had walked into TechFlow's lobby 8 years earlier with engineering dreams and naive optimism about family loyalty had been transformed through crisis into someone with deeper understanding of human nature, business ethics, and the price of genuine innovation. The transformation was painful but ultimately empowering, creating capabilities and insights that would guide future challenges and opportunities. Jessica Chen joined me on stage as we accepted recognition for our collaborative work on advancing automation technology, while maintaining focus on practical applications that serve real people rather than just generating impressive technical specifications or financial return. Our partnership had survived external manipulation and emerged stronger, demonstrating that professional relationships based on mutual respect and shared values can withstand even sophisticated attempts at interference. The audience's standing ovation represented recognition not just for technical achievement, but for the courage required to defend innovation from manipulation and sabotage. My story had become inspiration for other professionals facing similar challenges, proving that systematic interference can be overcome through proper documentation, legal protection, and unwavering commitment to professional integrity. As the ceremony concluded, I looked toward a future filled with opportunities that would have been impossible if I'd accepted Patricia's limitations or accommodated her manipulation campaign. The experience had taught me that protecting individual rights and creative freedom sometimes requires confrontation and conflict,
but the alternative of accepting undermining and interference leads inevitably to diminished potential and wasted innovation. The patents bearing my name would continue generating benefits for millions of small businesses worldwide, creating the practical improvements in efficiency and effectiveness that had motivated my original research. The autoflow algorithm's success represented validation that breakthrough innovation emerges from individual creativity and determination rather than committee consensus or family approval. Most importantly, the experience had demonstrated that professional manipulation and interference can be defeated through courage, documentation, and systematic legal response. My victory over Patricia's campaign had created precedents and resources that would help other innovators defend themselves against similar attacks, ensuring that future breakthrough technologies wouldn't be limited by external manipulation or family politics. The woman who had once accommodated unreasonable criticism to preserve family harmony had become someone who understood that genuine respect and healthy relationships require clear boundaries and firm consequences for manipulation attempts. The transformation was complete, creating capabilities and insights that would guide whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.